The Mongols, unstoppable, invincible, the architects of the largest empire the world has ever known. By the mid-13th century, they had swept through Asia, the Middle East, and Europe like an unrelenting storm. Their battle tactics were unmatched, their warriors relentless. No army had stood in their way, from the ancient cities of China to the heart of Europe. These horsemen, led by Genghis Khan and his successors, carved their way across continents with lightning speed and ferocious strength. But despite their vast conquests, their journey would soon meet its match in one fateful moment. That moment came at Ain Jalut, a battlefield that would change the course of history forever. It was here, in the summer of 1260, that the Mongols encountered a force that would defy their perceived invincibility. The Mamluks, an elite military class forged from former slaves. For the Mongols, the Battle of Ain Jalut wasn't just another victory waiting to be claimed. It would be a defining moment of their empire. For the Mamluks, it was a fight for survival, a chance to secure their place in history. This wasn't just a battle, it was a defining struggle between two cultures, two armies, and two leaders whose destinies would collide with monumental consequences. The Mongol Empire, under Genghis Khan's genius leadership, had conquered more territory than any empire before it. From the steppes of Mongolia to the plains of China, the Mongols had created an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. The conquest of the Islamic world in particular left a bloody mark. In 1258, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, led the Mongol forces to sack Baghdad, the cultural and intellectual heart of the Islamic Golden Age. The city was reduced to rubble, its libraries burned, and its population massacred. It was an act of terror, designed to send a message to any who dared oppose the Mongol war machine. Hulagu's triumph in Baghdad marked a new phase in the Mongol campaign. The Middle East, once rich in culture and knowledge, had been laid bare under Mongol rule. With the fall of Baghdad, Hulagu believed that his conquest was inevitable, that no power could stand against him. But in the shadows of this conquest, a storm was brewing. This storm would not be of Mongol origin, but of something entirely different. Among the Mongol generals was one whose story is woven with faith, loyalty, and a sense of divine purpose. Kitbuka, a devout Nestorian Christian, was one of Hulagu's most trusted commanders. To Kitbuka, his service to Hulagu was not just a duty, it was a divine calling. Kitbuka believed that the Mongol conquests were part of a larger godly plan, one that would reshape the world. As a Christian general, his devotion to both the Mongol cause and his faith created a tension that would be tested on the battlefield of Ain Jalut. Kitbuka's mission was clear: to advance the Mongol Empire further into the Levant, pushing into the lands of the Mamluks, who had recently risen to power in Egypt. But what Kitbuka did not know was that he was about to face an enemy unlike any he had encountered before. A force born from the crucible of hardship and shaped by the harsh realities of life in the Islamic world. The Mamluks were not mere soldiers. They were a people forged from fire, their spirit hardened by years of adversity. The Mamluks were not born of noble blood. They were slaves brought from foreign lands to serve as soldiers. Yet through skill, bravery, and sheer determination, they rose to power. Led by Sultan Qutuz and his general Baibars, the Mamluks were a force that was not easily understood by their enemies. They had learned to fight not for honor, not for wealth, but for survival. The Mamluks had long known what it was like to be oppressed, to be the underdogs. But now they were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for a place in history. Sultan Qutuz, a figure of mystery and leadership, had come from humble beginnings. He had been a slave who had fought his way to the top, not just in the military, but in the political landscape of Egypt. His rise to power was marked by betrayal and cunning, and by the time he became sultan, he had earned the loyalty of his soldiers through sheer force of will. His leadership was unyielding, his resolve ironclad. General Baibars, on the other hand, was the embodiment of the Mamluk spirit. Born a slave in the far reaches of the Mongol Empire, Baibars had fought his way through the ranks, his strength, intelligence, and brutal tactics earning him the respect of both his men and his enemies. Baibars was not just a commander, he was a strategist, a man who could see the larger picture, while maintaining a deep understanding of the battlefield. The Mamluks were not fighting just for their lives. They were fighting for the survival of their culture, their religion, and their very way of life. They knew that if the Mongols succeeded, the Islamic world would fall, and the remnants of their civilization would be erased. The Battle of Ain Jalut, fought in September 1260, would be the turning point in this monumental struggle. The Mongols, led by Kitbuka, advanced into the Levant, their eyes set on Egypt, the last major stronghold standing in their way. The Mamluks, under Sultan Qutuz and General Baibars, faced the impossible task of stopping an army that had seemed unstoppable. Both sides knew the stakes were high. For the Mongols, victory meant the complete domination of the Middle East and the further expansion of their empire. For the Mamluks, defeat would mean annihilation. They had no choice but to fight. Sultan Qutuz made the bold decision to engage the Mongols at Ain Jalut, a strategic location in Palestine. It was a place where they could use their superior knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. As the battle began, the Mongols unleashed their infamous cavalry, fast, skilled, and ruthless. But the Mamluks were prepared. Using their knowledge of the land and their disciplined tactics, they managed to hold their ground against the Mongol onslaught. The Mamluks countered with a series of well-timed ambushes, using the terrain to trap the Mongol forces. The tide of the battle began to turn when Baibars led a decisive charge that broke the Mongol lines. Kitbuka, despite his strategic brilliance, was unable to overcome the Mamluk defense. His forces were pushed back, and in the chaos of retreat, Kitbuka was captured. The Mongols, who had seemed invincible, had met their match. The dust of Ain Jalut settled like a shroud over the battlefield, but the echo of the Mongol defeat would reverberate through history. The Mamluks had achieved what seemed impossible. They had halted the Mongol advance, and in doing so, they had delivered a blow not just to the Mongol Empire, but to the very notion of their invincibility. In the immediate aftermath, the Mongols were forced into retreat. Kitbuka, who had once been a commander feared by all, was captured, and his fate sealed the loss of the Mongols' strategic initiative in the Levant. His capture was symbolic, an immense humiliation for the Mongols, who had never known such a setback. The Mamluks, however, were not only victorious on the battlefield, their triumph was a profound statement of resistance, one that would go on to shape the geopolitical landscape for years to come. This victory was not just the result of superior military tactics or even the advantage of the terrain. It was the product of a deeper resolve, a unity among the Mamluks that transcended loyalty to their sultan or generals. They had fought for their very existence. The Islamic world, which had been in danger of succumbing to Mongol domination, now had a fighting chance to reclaim its destiny. Sultan Qutuz's role in the Battle of Ain Jalut cannot be understated. His leadership was nothing short of remarkable. Qutuz was not a man who had been born to the throne. His rise to power had been marked by struggle, intrigue, and betrayal. Born a slave, he had been brought to Egypt, where he ascended to prominence within the Mamluk military ranks. It was not just his martial prowess that made him an exceptional leader, but his ability to unite an army of men from diverse backgrounds, all bound by a singular purpose: to protect Egypt and the Islamic world from the Mongol scourge. Qutuz's decision to engage the Mongols at Ain Jalut was a gamble, but one rooted in deep understanding. He knew that if the Mongols were allowed to advance into Egypt, their conquest would be virtually unstoppable. The fall of Baghdad and the destruction wrought across the Islamic heartlands had shown just how ruthless and determined Hulagu Khan's forces were. But Qutuz had an unwavering belief in his army, in his people. He knew they were capable of winning, if only they could stand united in the face of annihilation. His leadership was tested on the battlefield, as the Mamluks, though vastly outnumbered, held their ground against the Mongols. Their discipline, their knowledge of the land, and their strategic use of ambushes wore down the Mongol forces. Sultan Qutuz was not one to shy away from direct engagement. He led from the front, demonstrating the courage that made him a legend in Mamluk history. However, his role in the battle wasn't limited to just combat leadership. Qutuz's ability to inspire his men, to maintain morale, and to keep them focused on the greater goal was perhaps his greatest strength. General Baibars, the hero of Ain Jalut, had been a slave once too. Born in the steppes of the Mongol Empire, he had experienced firsthand the brutality of Mongol conquests. As a young boy, he had been captured by Mongol raiders and sold into slavery in Egypt, where he was eventually brought into the Mamluk military. From there, Baibars rose through the ranks, his ferocity and intellect earning him the respect of those around him. Baibars was more than just a general. He was a master tactician, a man who understood the intricacies of warfare as few others did. His use of deception and feints during the battle was instrumental in outflanking the Mongols, and his decision to lead a daring cavalry charge during the heat of the battle was the turning point that broke the Mongol lines. His leadership was the perfect complement to Sultan Qutuz's strategy, and together they formed a formidable force that the Mongols could not overcome. It was Baibars' charge that would go down in history as one of the most daring and successful military maneuvers of the era. His ability to read the battlefield and act swiftly ensured the Mamluk victory, and it was Baibars who would go on to cement his legacy as one of the greatest military minds of his time. The Battle of Ain Jalut didn't just stop the Mongols. It marked the beginning of their decline in the Middle East. Despite their vast empire, the Mongols were now forced to contend with a unified, determined enemy. The loss at Ain Jalut shattered the Mongols' aura of invincibility. Though they would continue to rule vast portions of their empire for years to come, their power in the Levant and Egypt was effectively ended. Their dreams of total domination of the Islamic world had been thwarted. Following their defeat, Hulagu Khan's forces were scattered. The Mongol Empire itself, though still powerful, was now fractured, with the western branch of the Mongol Empire, the Ilkhanate, no longer able to maintain the momentum it once had. The defeat at Ain Jalut signaled the beginning of the end for the Mongols in the Middle East, as they had no real foothold left in the region. From this point forward, the Mamluks would hold their ground, and Egypt would become a bastion of power in the Islamic world for the next 2 centuries. In the years following Ain Jalut, General Baibars' role in the Mamluk state would grow even more significant. After Sultan Qutuz's assassination in 1260, likely orchestrated by Baibars himself, Baibars ascended to the throne, where he would go on to establish what historians call the Mamluk Golden Age. Under his leadership, Egypt and the Levant flourished. Baibars solidified the Mamluks' power in the region by defending it against the Mongols, Crusaders, and other enemies, transforming Egypt into a military and cultural powerhouse. Baibars' reign brought a renewed sense of order and strength to the Islamic world. He led successful campaigns against the Crusaders, retaking key territories such as Antioch and Acre. Under his leadership, the Mamluks reformed their military and created a robust infrastructure that would continue to thrive long after his death. His legacy lived on, not just as a brilliant tactician, but as a ruler who transformed the Mamluks into one of the most formidable powers in the region. The Battle of Ain Jalut, as much as it was a military clash, was a moment of ideological transformation. It represented the strength of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds and the power of unity in protecting one's civilization. It was a battle not just for land, but for the survival of a culture and a belief system. For the Mamluks, it was the culmination of years of struggle against an empire that had seemed destined to conquer everything in its path. Their victory was a statement to the world. No empire, no matter how vast, could endure if it was not met with an equally unyielding spirit of resistance. In the centuries that followed, Ain Jalut would be remembered not just as a military victory, but as the defining moment that reshaped the course of history. The Mamluks would continue to rule Egypt and the Levant for centuries, and the memory of their triumph over the Mongols would serve as an inspiration for future generations. They had turned the tide of history, and in doing so, they had ensured the survival of the Islamic world for generations to come. The Battle of Ain Jalut is a reminder that history is often shaped by moments of unexpected resistance, where seemingly unstoppable forces are met by the indomitable will of those who refuse to bow to fate. It is a story of survival, of the courage to stand up against an empire that seemed destined to rule forever. But in the end, Ain Jalut proved that even the most powerful empires can fall, not through the might of their enemies alone, but through the strength and determination of those who believe in their cause. The legacy of the Mamluks and the memory of their triumph at Ain Jalut continues to resonate across the centuries, a reminder of the power of resistance, the strength of unity, and the enduring impact of one battle that changed the course of history forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you were inspired by the courage and strategy of Ain Jalut, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with fellow history enthusiasts and hit the notification bell to never miss an epic tale from the past. Until next time, keep exploring the battles that changed the world.